Welcome to Adoption Utah. Here we share stories and practical advice from those who understand adoption in Utah. I'm Donna Pope, your host. Welcome, anyone who's joining us, and we're so excited to have Troy here with us. Troy has got a very interesting story, but I'm going to let him tell himself. But what's important that I want everybody to know is he's not just an adoptee, but he's also an author, and he has learned a lot about adoption and will share with us some of the things that he learned. Troy, tell us a little bit about your story. Start back as early as you can remember.
Well, as you identified, I was adopted. I was adopted at 5 days old. My birth mother made the decision to put me up for adoption after she realized that raising me as a single mom was not the kind of life she wanted. It was a closed adoption, so I didn't know any of that until much later in life. But it was a closed adoption. And all I knew was that I was adopted. I was born at the hospital down the street from where I grew up. And my mom and dad who adopted me told me that adoption meant special love. And they said things like Jesus was adopted by Joseph, and so it's something special. So my whole life, I always introduced myself, especially as a kid, going around saying, "Hey, I'm Troy, I'm adopted." So I thought it was pretty cool.
And did that ever change? Did you always think that you were cool because you were adopted?
I never didn't think I was cool because I was adopted. When I became in middle school, I became a little bit curious about family and where I might have come from. And so I would find myself, because I knew I was adopted. I mean, I knew I was born near my birth mother, probably lived near me. And so I was always wondering, like, did she have other kids? Like, were there other people around? And so I'd always go to school and look around at all the other kids and wonder, hey, I wonder if that's my sibling.
Did you ever ask your parents?
So my mom and dad never brought up the topic of finding our birth parents. So the unintended message that I got from that is that was not a topic that we were able to discuss. They always talked about us being adopted. So that was something that we could talk about, but it was never discussed that we could ask about that. And my mother did make it known that they didn't have a lot of information since it was closed. So she had shared the amount of information that they had about me, which was very little. But we never really did have that conversation until I was in my 30s.
Okay, so let's step back. When you say us, there are other siblings that were adopted.
Yes, so I was adopted first, and then my brother was adopted 3.5 years after that from a different mother, actually from a different state. And then my older sister, so I was firstborn, and then I was demoted to the middle child, I say, because my older sister, I was 5 and she was adopted when she was 10. So she knew who her birth family was, and had come from a pretty harsh environment, and my parents adopted her when she was 10.
Okay, so we need to follow through on that one, but then we don't want to forget about when you were 30. So your parents adopted this 10-year-old child when you were 5.
Yeah.
How was that for you?
At the time, I was really excited. I remember the day she came, and she had her own room, and I remember being really excited that I had a sister, and then watching what she went through, because she had a lot of trauma based on her birth family. So a lot of trauma, and my parents trying to navigate that. And so kind of watching her struggle her whole life was hard, but it didn't impact my feelings towards her. I always loved her, but I just watched the things that she struggled with her whole life, and that was really challenging.
I've thought I have a brother who's quite challenging, and I've thought over the years the things that I learned in order to relate to him and help him and be good to him have actually served me in very important ways throughout in other ways of my life. Same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I've learned the importance of connection, and I learned um, a lot. She struggled with a lot of things, and she passed away probably about 4 years ago of a heart attack. But she struggled with a lot of things, and so some of the things that I learned from her were things not to do.
I'm assuming drugs are in there.
I don't know. I don't know if that was. I don't know if that was the case, but she did make difficult. She did have a difficult life, much different than the life that me and my brother lived, and I think a lot of that was the trauma that she'd had.
So, something amazing about your parents. They they took on a traumatized child in your sister. Now, it sounds like both you and your brother were adopted when you were babies.
Correct.
And so that is a little bit different than taking on a 10-year-old. What are your thoughts on your parents?
My parents were not able to have children, and they always wanted to have children. So the fact that they were willing to love on this girl who came from a really challenging past and to bring her into our home, I think says a lot about who they were and the heart that they had, and the kind of care that they wanted to give.
And what's your relationship with your little brother like?
So each one of us has our own personality. We're all very different. And I thought that that was because we were adopted, but I realized, no, that doesn't really have a lot to do with it.
You're just all different.
So we have a good relationship, but we're not close. When we're together, we laugh and have a good time, but we don't really connect all that much. We'll text each other happy birthday, and we'll call each other maybe around the holidays. He lives in a different state than I do, and but we, like, I just texted him yesterday. He's a brand new grandpa, and so had a nice conversation. I mean, texting about that, but we're not that close.
And so tell me about your parents. Are they still living? What's going on there?
So my mother is still alive. She will be 80 next year. And my father passed away in 19, no, uh, he passed away about 6 years ago.
And so you mentioned that they had never sort of said, "Oh, go search for your biological parents." And so you kind of got the feeling of, "No, we just don't do that." So what changed that?
Well, my brother would bring it up to my dad, and my dad would cry and say, "Oh, you think I'm a bad dad." So it kind of a guilt trip for him, but he didn't, neither of us felt that way. But my brother really wanted to understand more about his past and why he was put up for adoption. There were a lot of questions that he had about that.
So I'm going to pause with that because that's such an interesting thought. You did not see your dad as a bad dad, but and you and your brother still had some questions you wanted to ask about your biological parents, but expressing that to your dad made him feel like a bad dad.
Well, my my brother and my dad had a really they were closer to each other than me and my dad. My dad had a my dad had a temper, and so he was pretty violent most of our lives. So he was scary to me. I mean, I loved him, but he was scary. My brother had a better relationship with him. But even when my brother would talk to him about it, my dad would, um, I think he would feel that we thought he was not good enough or we wanted to replace him. My mother felt that way too, but that was never the case. It was just we wanted to understand our story and where we came from. So it wasn't a reflection of um, how we felt about them as parents. It really was wanting to understand more about our story and our where we came from.
See, that's quite complex because even the best parents in the world feel perhaps second rate when they're adoptive parents. But if your dad was struggling with his temper, was struggling with his violence, he undoubtedly also felt some guilt.
Oh, I'm sure he did. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he couldn't really support you guys searching then.
Well, I think he would have. He wasn't like, no, you can't. He would go into shame for himself. I don't think that he was not supportive of us having the search. His own shame would overwhelm him.
Right. And that would bring that up. So let's stick with that for just a second more. No kid should be getting beat up by their dad.
No, and he didn't. Well, he would beat up my mother, and then my mother would beat us up.
Oh, wow.
Um,
That's worse all the way around.
yeah, there were some things that they needed to work through, and I love both my parents. I don't have bad feelings towards them, but growing up was challenging because of the violence that occurred in our home.
Generally, we think of adoptees going to a really good home, and we honor the fact that these great parents took these kids in, and that's all wonderful. But you went to a home full of violence.
Yep, I did, and a lot of love. Like it wasn't all bad. Like when things were great, they were great. When they weren't, they were not great. So there, um, I have fond memories. I have beautiful memories with them, and I also, as I'm a therapist now, so I've realized like they had their own things that they probably never ever worked through. They never, and I think there was a lot of shame. We talk about shame about my dad, but there was a lot of shame for both my mom and my dad in even like talking about it or even sharing that. There was very much this, we don't talk about stuff that's not that's what's happening in our family. We don't talk about outside of the family. And so I think that really led to them maybe not getting the help that they could have used. But I also think that based on them, they did their best to try and raise us. And I'm grateful for what I went through because I wouldn't be the person I am today without that. I don't think I would have the empathy and the compassion, but it still was challenging.
Wow. That it's a great attitude.
Thank you.
You're kind of going, if I hadn't gotten beat up and been in a violent, traumatic home, I wouldn't be the man I am now. That's an attitude that many people don't get to.
It takes a long time.
So how did you get there?
Well, so I somehow or other, I ended up in a social work class trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I ended up in a social work 101 class and I loved it. And then one of my professors said, well, Troy, if you really want to be a good social worker, you need to go do your own work. And I thought she was crazy. Like, what you talking? Well, I didn't think I had any. I was about 24, 23. And I was like, what are you talking about? I don't think I have any work to do. And then we moved. I had gotten married at the time, and we moved to go get my master's. And they put me in a drug and alcohol rehab facility to do my internship. So I was working with people who were drug addicts, and I grew up in a really conservative. Well, I grew up in Utah, so you can guess what religion I grew up in.
Well, You grew up
Yep.
LDS,
So very conservative, never did drugs, never drank alcohol, none of that stuff, and never seen that. And here I am in this room trying to help these people who are addicted to cocaine and heroin and alcohol. And I'm like, I don't know what to do to help you. And then they began to tell their stories about how they had been abused or they had been rejected and they had all kinds of things happen to them. And I'm like, wow, that's just like me. And that's really what opened the door to like, oh, I have what I call now wounds, attachment wounds, just like you. And although maybe my addictive or numbing behaviors are different than yours, I stumbled into some things like that as a way of trying to cope with that. And I don't want to continue to do that. I don't want to bring that into the world if I have kids. So I got to work on this stuff. So that was really, really the momentum that helped me start to look at these wounds and how they affected me and what I came to believe about myself. It also gave me a place where I could really forgive my parents.
Interesting. And so you had a good therapist that began to work with you.
I did. I had several. Yeah.
Tell a little bit about how that process went.
I was scared to go to therapy. It's nothing that we had ever experienced in our lives. But I went, and the first therapist I went to really helped me just kind of normalize my experience and help me see that what I was going through was not uncommon. Just a lot of the own shame that I had. And then when I moved to Arizona, where I still live, I found another therapist who really helped me start to take a look at my own past and part of who I am and come to love that part of me because I was hating that part of me. And
Explain that just a little bit more.
so I'm gay. So, and growing up LDS, that was not something that I I was in denial about it, and it was bullied a lot in middle school about it. The boys would tease me a lot, so that wasn't something I could be open about, and I hated that part of me.
Mm.
I hated that, and I just wanted that part to go away. And I actually went to some reparative therapy to try and make it go away. But even that was helped me see that I had trauma. There was a ton of trauma, so that helped me with that and come to a place where I could love me and and not blame my parents. My parents have their own wounds, and I have my wounds, and everybody's wounded in their own way. Even if you're not adopted, everyone's wounded in their own way. And we do things to try and deal with that pain. But when we can start talking about it and we can start doing wound care around that, those wounds can heal. And it's not really about who gave us the wounds. It's what do we do with those wounds. And that's really where I came to know that I'm enough. I'm a man of light. I'm a man of love, and I am gay, and that's okay too.
And so did you ever go back and talk with your parents about some of these wounds and struggles?
I did. I never had the chance to tell my father. Um, I would have, but he passed away before I was able to. But we did talk about some of the stuff about what was it going growing up, and some of the challenges, and it was always tenuous to talk about that with him because he had so much shame about that. Um, there was a moment though when it was after I had found my birth parents, and ironically, they all lived within 15 minutes of each other. So I had found my birth mother and then my birth father, and they all lived within 15 minutes of each other. So when I'd come home, it was trying to figure out how I could spend time with everybody. And so I'd be an hour here and 2 hours there, and it was really awful. I hated that. And my dad felt like I was not giving him enough time. And so he called me up one day and was telling me that I was not giving him enough time. And for whatever reason, whatever he said really just made me mad. And so I was going to go confront him and tell him what it was like growing up in a home where he was abusive and how he did this and that and all these things. And so I'm on my way driving to his house, and I'm just screaming and ready to just let him have it. And then I walked into his room. By that time, he had diabetes. His right leg had been cut off. He was on oxygen. He weighed probably 450 pounds, not healthy. And I walked in and I saw him with his oxygen around his nose, and I was just about ready to let him have it. And something stopped me. And I just saw this man that was hurting. Just this man with so much pain. And instead of yelling at him, I just said, "Dad, I love you." And there was just this, that was the moment when I was able to let everything go with him. It's just like, I knew a little bit about his history. I know that his father was physically abusive to him. Um, and he had a challenging life himself. And it was just like, I love you. And I see you're broken in so many ways. And
You broke the cycle.
yeah, it was amazing. So I just loved him. And after that, our relationship was so much better.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? So backing up to how you found your biological parents, tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So my brother was looking for his, and my mom's sister had played a very, very small role in connecting them to his birth mother. So he asked me, because she lived in Mesa, and so he asked me if I were there, I could go talk to her and ask if she knows anything about it. And she didn't. But inevitably, when anybody finds out that I'm adopted, the first question they ask is, well, do you want to find your birth parents, or have you found your birth parents? And so that she asked me, well, do you want to find your birth parents? And I said, well, I do, but I really don't know how my parents would take that, because that was not a topic that we could talk about.
How old were you then?
I was probably 37, 36. Well, my aunt went back home. My grandmother had died, and my mom and her sisters were trying to figure out kind of what to do. My grandpa was getting older and trying to figure out what to do with him. And so they're all having this little meeting, and somehow in there, my mom made the comment that her boys have never wanted to find their birth parents.
And you're going, whoa, that's not true.
Well, I wasn't there. My aunt said, well, that's not true.
That's not true.
And my mom was so mad. Oh, she was mad. So she calls me up the next morning and said, so your aunt told me that you want to find your birth parents. And I'm like, oh.
So she was mad at your aunt for saying that, or mad at you for wanting to?
She was mad that I didn't talk to her about it, that I went to my aunt instead of talking to her. And so she was mad. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have the opportunity to be honest or lie. And I'm gonna be honest. And I'm like, well, yeah. And it's because she asked me. You've never asked me if I ever wanted to find my birth parents. You never did. And so I didn't think that was a conversation, but people ask me all that all the time. And she said, well, your dad and I had always said that if you were interested, we would give you the information that we had, but you never brought it up. I'm like, well, you never brought it up. So, who's who? But she said, I can give you the background. And so she said, I just happened to read in the Standard Examiner that the bishop who helped facilitate the adoption is having his 60th wedding anniversary, and he now lives in St. George, and here's his name. So I get on Google and I find him, and within about 5 minutes, and I call him and I said, hey, like my mom told me that you might have information about where I came from. And he's like, well, yes, your aunt, your birth aunt, is best friends with my daughter, and her my birth aunt's husband's sister is the one who gave me up. And so he said, here's their names. And so I found them. She was a realtor. So I called her realtor number and left a message. And then I didn't hear anything for a couple of days. Well, it turns out they were out hunting. And so my uncle, my biological uncle, called me and talked to me on the phone and asked me some questions to see if it was legit. And he said, "Yeah, it matches. Let me go visit with your birth mother, and I want to meet her in person, and let me go see if she's interested in you meeting her." And I said, "Okay."
Okay, whoa, we got to pause there. How did you feel?
I was excited. Yeah, I was excited and nervous. So not only did I not want to make it challenging for my parents, but I also was reluctant to find her because I didn't know if she had gotten married. I didn't know if she had had children. I didn't know if she had told them about me. And so I didn't want to just show up in her life and blow up her life and cause problems. So I was grateful that he handled it the way he did, because I didn't want to just like say surprise and maybe she had never told anybody. So I was grateful that he was willing to be open, and I also had never really pursued it because I didn't want to disrupt her life.
One of the reasons I ask you that question is because when he says, "Let me go ask her," I'm sure there must have been a thought of what if she comes back and says no?
Absolutely. And I was prepared for that. And that would have been hard, but I I also wanted her to be able to have a choice, right?
Yeah. So he came back.
Well, so my grandpa passed away, and so I'm in the airport, in the Phoenix airport, on my way to his funeral, when my uncle calls me back and says, "Hey, she'd like to meet you. Is there any chance that you might be in Utah in the near future?" And I said, "Well, I am actually about ready to board a plane to go to Utah right now." Um, so we made plans to meet on a Saturday, and we met in front of the Layton High School in Layton Park. And so pulled up and was really nervous, and we all kind of sat in our cars for a little bit, and then we got out and I met her, and I met my uncle and his wife that I had talked to on the phone, and then I met my birth mother's husband, and it was beautiful. It was the most wonderful little moment. And we talked, and then over the next, I mean, I'm still closer. Over the next years, we continued to build a relationship, and it's been wonderful.
You know, you got to wonder, why was it so beautiful? What was it about that moment? I mean, we see it on TV, they hug and they connect. What was it that made that moment so beautiful?
For one, I knew that she had made a sacrifice to put me up for adoption. Um, Her brother told me on the phone, I was born on Valentine's Day, and my uncle told me when I was talking to him on the phone that every Valentine's Day she would look out the window and she would just cry and kind of wonder where I was, and say a prayer for me. And I knew, even though I didn't know the whole story, I knew why. I knew that she had made a sacrifice out of love for me. So one of the things that was beautiful about that moment was for me to just tell her thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for making the choice that you did, and I turned out pretty good. I'm not perfect, but I turned out pretty decent, and I know it's because of the decision that you made. So thank you. To be able to connect some dots and to see me and her, that was really wonderful to see her and me and vice versa. And just she immediately, I felt love from her, and I loved her. So that was beautiful.
Isn't that amazing that you felt love and you loved her immediately? Now, that doesn't always happen,
No,
but what a joy for you at that particular moment.
absolutely.
Did she have other children?
She did. She and her husband have 3 children, and um, 2 of them did not know about me. The middle child did, because she had also put up a child for adoption.
So mom told her the story.
But the other 2 didn't. And that was a little challenging for the oldest, which I understand, having been the oldest and then got demoted myself. But he and I actually are really good friends now. And then the youngest was really accepting of me too. So I've gone to their home for holidays and those kind of things, and it's been wonderful.
So I got to hear how your adoptive parents felt about this once you had met and they told you about it. I'm assuming you went back and then told them we met. How did that go?
My dad was happy for me. At the same time, he wished that I had talked to him about it before. But again, didn't know that that was a thing. And I knew what had happened with him and my brother talking about it didn't go well. So I didn't want to do that. But he was accepting. He wasn't really interested in knowing anything about them. But he was supportive. And then my mom was really afraid that my birth mother was going to replace her. And I remember going to dinner with my mom and her expressing some fear. And I'm like, why can't I love both of you? And it was almost like this light bulb went on for her, that she had not realized that that was possible, to be able,
You could do that.
yeah, to have love for both of them. They've never met either, but she asks about my birth mother often, and she's been warm and inviting about it.
So you're now a therapist, and you now, I'm sure, work with other adoptees going through. I'm sure you work with adoptees, adopted parents, birth parents.
All of the above.
What have you learned about this whole process?
One of the things that I kind of came to understand is what I call attachment wounds. And I've identified that there are 6 of them: loss, neglect, abandonment, betrayal, rejection, and abuse. And especially when I'm working with someone who's been adopted, there's wounds of abandonment, this feeling like I wasn't wanted, you gave me up, wounds of rejection, wounds of loss, the loss of things that we never even were able to experience, and those kind of things. And to be able to help give words to talk about those, so that we can grieve that, we can talk about it. What is mentionable is manageable. So when we can talk about it, it becomes more manageable. And then to help them understand, like, even though those wounds have happened, we get to define what that means for us. Even if we were abandoned or neglected or rejected, that doesn't mean that I'm not enough, or that I don't matter, or that I'm bad, or any of that. That's not what that means. So let's figure out what it really means, who I am. And so helping them separate what happened to them with their identity is part of that process. And then working with adopted parents, helping them understand that their children have wounds that they did not create, that they may not even realize they have, but they have these wounds that they came into this relationship with. My therapist helped me understand that. She helped me understand one time that even though I hadn't been with my birth mother since the day that I was born, I was in her womb for 9 months. I could hear her heart beating. I could hear the sound of her voice. I could hear her breathing. And then all of a sudden that was gone in a minute. And even though I didn't remember any of that growing up, that still had an impact on me as an infant. And so helping adoptive parents understand, like, there's things you can do to help them feel like they're belonging and they're loved and accepted. And you have to realize that some of the things that they go through are not because of you. And being able to help put words around that is important too.
Yeah. No. Let's do one more time those 6 wounds that we talked about.
Loss, neglect, rejection, abandonment, betrayal, and abuse.
What's interesting for you is if you look at the loss, maybe the feeling of abandonment, and then with your own family, a certain amount of abuse, you had quite a few of those wounds.
Did. And rejection in middle school, yeah, I had pretty much all of them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so knowing that people have those wounds, what do you as a therapist do to help them?
I said when I started to go to therapy, I didn't like me. I thought that I thought I was bad. I thought I was worthless, that I was no good, which led me to engage in some of the numbing behaviors that I was ashamed of. But when I was able to start reframing that and realizing that I have those wounds and the wounds can heal, but the wounds don't define me, that I know that I'm enough, that I'm worthy of love and belonging, that I matter. There are people in my life who love me, and I could really accept and let that love in. That really changed really the way that I show up in the world. And so that's what I try to help the people that I'm working with do the same. Like, let's change the stories that you've come to believe about yourself, because they're probably based in shame, and connect with the truth that you matter, you're enough, you are worthy of love, and all that.
So how do you let yourself be loved?
That was a really tough one. I was in the MTC and somebody had given a talk about if you really wanted to love yourself, if you really wanted to love others, you needed to love yourself. And I remember arguing with myself in the bathroom and saying, Troy, that is not true. Your whole life, you've tried to be kind. You've really tried to be loving and supportive to other people. You don't need to love yourself. That's just bull crap. I don't understand why that guy said that. And then the feeling came across me that said, Troy, the reason why that's true is that if you can't love yourself, when other people try to love on you, you push it away, you reject it. And so eventually they get tired of loving on you because they just are tired of you pushing it away. So part of the reason why that's true is when you can love yourself, you can let the love in, and then you can give it back, and it becomes this cycle of things. And that really started the trajectory of, okay, well, how can I love myself maybe a little bit? How can I let the love in just a little bit? And it was that, an inch at a time, a centimeter at a time, learning how to let things go, learning how to forgive me, until I got to a point where I could love myself.
So you were in the MTC.
I was.
So tell us about how, for the next 2 years, I'm assuming, you learned how to love yourself a little bit at a time.
I was able to serve in the California Roseville mission, and I worked with the Hmong people. So I spoke Hmong, and they're very loving people, very humble people, not judgmental. And so their culture and the way that they were fit with me and the way that I was. And I was able to love them, and I could tell they loved me. And it was really the beginning of, I'm going to let that in. Um, they kind of taught me in the MTC, you gotta be loving and respectful of these people so they're not offended. And part of that was letting them love on me.
I'm not familiar with the Hmong people. Please explain.
So the Hmong people, they're a tribe of, they're from the mountains of Laos, and they're a tribal people. And during the Vietnam War, they were allies with the Americans and those who were fighting against communism. And then when when the Americans pulled out, they were left by themselves. And what would happen is the communists would go in and they would annihilate cities. They would annihilate these villages. And so they became refugees and they escaped from their country and they went all over the world. But for some reason, the huge populations of them have gathered in Wisconsin and in California. A lot of them ended up in Utah and then migrated to California. And so there's huge populations of them there in those cities. So that's where, or in those states. And so I was called to work in the Roseville area with them.
And so for 2 years, you work with these Hmong people and you feel their love and you're able to express your love.
Yeah.
And you came back from that experience feeling more lovable than you had felt before.
And it was right after that that I ended up in the social work class as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life and kind of continued that trajectory of figuring out how to love myself a little bit more and how to help other people love themselves too.
And through all of this, you've got these questions in your mind of who are my biological parents? Why did they place me for adoption? And you've also got this complexity of your parents being sometimes a little abusive and dealing with that. And you start therapy and you start moving through therapy and learning a little bit more about yourself. So this is a lot. I mean, everyone has complex lives, but this is a quite a complex life.
Yeah.
And what were some of the things of your belief system that helped you move through this?
When I understood the concept of wounds, I realized that wounds can heal. I do have a faith in a higher power and believe, especially, I believe in Jesus Christ. And when I think about those wounds of loss, neglect, rejection, abandonment, betrayal, and abuse, he experienced all 6 himself in pretty dramatic and painful ways. And so I was able to understand that he can help me heal those wounds just like he can help others. And that as long as I'm not continuing to like blame and point fingers and try to do that, but to understand that they're wounded and I'm wounded and we're all wounded and we can all find ways to heal, then my journey and my work is to continue to do the wound care and the self-care for me that I need and to create a space where others can do the same, whether that's my family or the clients that I see or even my friends.
Talk with me a little bit about your writing.
So as I developed this concept about the attachment wounds and how to heal them, I began to share that concept with others and they wondered where they could learn more about that. And I was like, well, it's in my head. But eventually, people kept encouraging me to write a book. So I wrote my first book, the Finding Peace Workbook, in 2017. And it's a workbook and a self-help book kind of mushed together. And that became my first one. The second one I wrote was about just the model itself. I call it the Finding Peace model and how it works. And then I was approached by a publishing company to write a book about self-love. So it's called The Year of Self-Love, and there's 365 prompts about loving ourselves. And so that was my third.
So if there are adoptees, adoptive parents, biological parents out there listening to this, what advice would you give them?
First, to the birth parents who've made some decisions to give their child up for adoption, I want to tell you that I know that was not an easy decision to make. And I want to honor that. And I want you to know that you are enough. And I know that you did that because you were wanting a better life for your child. So I want you to know that I honor that. For the adoptee, the child, I know that the circumstances around your birth may be challenging and you may have questions, and hopefully you've been adopted into a family that loves you, but I want you to know that you are enough, that you matter, and that there's a reason that you were born and put on this earth. And hopefully you can find that reason and you can connect with that, because there was a reason and you are enough. And for the adoptive parents, thank you for being willing to take someone into your home and raise them like your own and love on them and care about them and provide safe space for them. Not everybody can do that. And so thank you for your love and your willingness to open your heart to do that. You make the world a better place. So thank you.
And then finally, for other therapists or other people out there trying to help people in the adoption community, what advice would you give them?
Hear the story. Listen to the stories without judgment. And using those words, the attachment wound language probably will help create some space around exploring maybe what you feel like you've lost, or maybe what you feel like you didn't get. And that applies to all three populations, the parents, the adoptive parents, and the child. But to be able to listen to their story and really provide space for them to share and help them know they're not alone. They're not alone.
Troy, this has been a wonderful visit.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Adoption Utah. I'm Donna Pope. Please visit adoptionutah.org to sign up for our newsletter and find caring experts who can help you with your adoption journey.